Hello, brave hearts, and welcome back to Girls Who Rise. I'm really glad we're here together again today. Let's get really comfortable. I want you to gently settle in right where you are. Maybe you're sitting, maybe you're curled up somewhere cozy, or maybe you're just listening quietly. Wherever you are, that is the perfect spot. And as we get ready to listen, I want you to think about this for just a moment. What do you do when you're learning to trust yourself, but you still feel nervous sometimes? That kind of nervous feeling can show up right before something new or right before something important. Your heart might beat a little faster. Your thoughts might start moving quickly. You might not be sure exactly what will happen next. When you're growing and learning and becoming more confident, that feeling can still be there. That's where we find Anne today. But before we begin our story today, let's take a quiet moment together. If you'd like, place your hand gently over your heart. Take a slow breath in and breathe out. Welcome back to Girls Who Rise, a place for imagination and courage, and stories that help us grow. And remember, the way you notice things matters. The way you see the world matters. Your thoughts are important. Before we step back into the story, here is a gentle story note. This is a shortened version of Anne of Green Gables, shaped to be easier to listen to. Nothing important has been left out. It's still Anne's story, just told in a modern, clear way. And now, let's begin. Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Chapter 20. The Picnic. Anne wore the dress the next Sunday. She had taken it out carefully that morning, smoothing the fabric with her hands before putting it on, making sure everything sat just right. It wasn't just a new dress. It meant that someone had noticed something she hadn't said out loud, that someone had been paying attention to her and had chosen to do something just for her. It gave her a quiet sense of being seen, something she carried with her as she stepped outside. The grass was cool beneath her shoes, each blade holding a faint trace of moisture that hadn't yet disappeared. The air carried the clean scent of the turned earth, and somewhere, nearby, a screen door opened and closed again. The whole morning felt unhurried, like nothing needed to be rushed. Anne walked to church beside Marilla and Matthew. She was aware of her dress, but more than that, she was aware of how at ease she felt within herself. When she arrived at Sunday school, Anne didn't pause. She walked to her seat and sat down without hesitation. As she settled in, one girl glanced toward her, and Anne met her eyes and gave a small smile. The girl smiled back before turning again to her friend. It was an easy exchange, nothing forced. She wasn't watching for what might go wrong, and she wasn't wondering how she appeared to others. She felt like she belonged there. When Sunday school ended, people didn't go straight home. They stayed for a picnic. The picnic baskets had already been brought, and the long tables were set out on the lawn. Children ran ahead across the grass, their voices carrying back toward the churchyard. Mothers followed more slowly, chatting with each other, setting out dishes, calling names when someone wandered too far. Anne stepped outside with Diana, the sunlight falling across the yard, bright enough to make her blink. "Today feels different," Anne said. "How so?" Diana asked. Anne looked out over the field and the lawns. Anne looked out over the lawn where the blankets were being spread beneath the trees. "I don't feel like I'm trying to have everything figured out," she said. "I'm just here." Diana smiled. "That's how it should feel." They walked together toward the others. A group of girls had already gathered near the far side, and Diana was called over at once. "Come sit with us," one of the girls called to Diana. Diana turned to Anne. "Come on, let's go." Anne went with her. At first, she listened more than she spoke, but not in a way that she used to, watching closely, trying to understand where she fit. When someone asked her something, she answered easily. When another girl laughed, she found herself laughing too. She didn't have to think about it. It just felt easy. After they had eaten, blankets were folded and people began to move about again. Some of the younger children started a game near the fence. A few older girls walked toward the trees, looking for a quieter place to sit. Diana and Anne rose and went with them. The sounds from the churchyard were quieter here. Anne noticed something on the hem of her dress, and she brushed it quickly. Diana nudged her lightly. You're being careful, I see. I told Marilla I would be, Anne replied, though I don't think she quite trusts that promise. Diana grinned at her. You haven't climbed anything yet. Not yet, Anne said, and they both laughed. They walked slowly, talking, not always finishing one thought before another began. Then, from the direction of the churchyard, a voice carried clearly across the field. It was Mrs. Lynde. My brooch is gone. The women near the table stopped talking. A few people turned to look. Someone set down a dish and didn't pick it back up. What was that? Diana said to Anne. Wanting to see what was happening, Diana turned and started back. Come on, she said. Anne went with her. Near the steps of the church, a small group had already gathered around Mrs. Lynde. She stood there, one hand at her collar, her lips drawn in a thin line. She glanced around the group, then spoke. I had it with me this morning. I am quite sure of it. Perhaps it came loose, someone suggested. It could be in the grass. Did you look inside? But Mrs. Lynde was already looking around. Anne felt it before she understood it, the way people were not just searching, but watching. Mrs. Lynde's eyes moved across the group, then stopped. Anne, she said. Anne stepped forward. Yes? You were near the porch earlier. Yes, Diana and I both were there. Did you notice my brooch then? I think I did, Anne said. I remember it catching the light. Did you touch it? Anne blinked, surprised. No. Are you quite sure? Yes, I am. Anne didn't know what to say for a moment. Then, I didn't touch it. I see, Mrs. Lynde said. Anne felt it then, not the words, but the feeling of not being believed. I didn't take it, she said. No one had said that, but the meaning was there. Mrs. Lynde drew herself up slightly. No one has accused you, but it is best to be clear when something of value has gone missing. I am being clear, Anne said, her voice sharper than she meant it to be. I didn't take it. Anne, Diana said quietly, tone. But Anne didn't look at her. There is no need to answer like that, Mrs. Lynde said. By then, Marilla had come up behind them. What's going on? My brooch is missing, said Mrs. Lynde, and Anne seems to think that she is being treated unfairly for being asked a simple question. Anne turned at once. She thinks I took it. I did not say that. You didn't have to, Anne said. You meant it. Anne, said Marilla. Anne stopped speaking. You will apologize, Marilla said quietly. Anne looked at her. But I didn't do anything. You spoke improperly. I was only trying to. You will apologize. For a moment, Anne didn't move. Everything from earlier, the ease, the laughter, the feeling of sitting where she belonged, that felt far away now. I'm sorry I spoke that way, she said at last. The words felt stiff. Mrs. Lynde accepted it with a short nod. The search went on, but the day had changed. The brooch was not found. Anne did not join in. She stood beside Diana for a moment, and then said quietly, I didn't take it. I know, Diana said, but it didn't fix anything. On the walk home, Anne didn't say much. At last she said, she thought I had taken it. Her words were filled with hurt. Marilla didn't answer for a moment. Even so, you can answer calmly. It's hard to answer the right way when someone believes something about you that's not true. That evening, Anne hung up her dress and stood there for a moment. Earlier that day, things had felt easy, but not so much now. She stood there thinking about what had happened. Everyone looking at her, questioning her. I didn't take it, she said to herself, just to remind herself it was true. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment when they all thought she had taken it. Chapter 21, Anne to the Rescue. A few days later, Anne had come over the way she often did to spend the afternoon with Diana, expecting it to be like any other day. Diana met her at the door. I'm glad you came, her voice lower than usual. Is something wrong? Anne asked. Diana hesitated. Minnie May isn't well. She has a bad cold, I think. Anne stepped inside at once. From upstairs there came uneven breathing, small at first, then catching, like each breath took more effort. Anne stopped. That's not just a cold, she said quietly. Diana shook her head. She's been like this since this morning. Mother had to go out, and she said to keep her warm, but her voice stopped. I don't know what to do. I've heard that before, Anne said. Let me see her. On the bed lay Diana's little sister, Minnie May. She was small for her age, her hair pressed damp against her forehead, her cheeks flushed a deep, uneven red. Minnie May's breathing came again, uneven, harder than it should have been. Anne stepped closer to the bed. I know what this is, she said quietly. Diana looked at her. Do you? Is it dangerous? It can be, Anne said, but it can be helped. Is there any medicine in the house? Something in a small bottle? Something your mother keeps for when someone is sick? Diana nodded quickly. I'll go look. She hurried out of the room. Anne stayed where she was. She reached out and touched Minnie May's forehead lightly. You're all right, she said quietly. We're going to help you. The breathing came again, catching, uneven. Anne listened. She had heard that kind of breathing before and knew what it meant. That's croup, she said, a sickness that makes it hard to breathe. Diana came back holding a small bottle. Is this it? Anne took it and checked it quickly. We have to give her some, she said. It will help her breathe easier. Diana slipped her arm behind Minnie May, lifting her gently. Anne gave the medicine slowly. For a moment, nothing changed. Then Minnie May coughed, and her breathing eased a little. Again, she said after a small moment. They gave Minnie May another small amount. The next breath came a little easier. Is it working? Diana asked. Maybe, Anne said. We'll stay with her just to make sure. Anne stayed beside the bed watching. She didn't move, listening for each breath as it came. Gradually, they grew a little easier than before. She needs to stay warm, Anne said, adjusting the blanket. We'll keep watching. Diana stayed close beside her. How do you know what to do? She asked quietly. Anne kept her eyes on Minnie May. I've seen it before, she said. Diana nodded, still watching. I'm really glad you're here. Anne glanced at her and then back again. So am I. After a while, the sound of wheels came from outside, stopping near the door. A moment later, it opened. Diana, I'm back. Where are you? Mrs. Barry called. In here. Mrs. Barry stepped inside the room and paused, letting her eyes adjust to the dim room. She saw the girls sitting beside the bed and moved toward them at once. What's going on? She asked. She reached the bed and leaned over Minnie May, placing her hand against her forehead, then listened to her breathing. Diana stepped closer. She got really sick. Her breathing wasn't right, but Anne helped her. Mrs. Barry stayed there a moment, watching, then straightened slightly. What did you give her? She asked. The medicine from the cupboard, Anne said. Just a small amount, twice. Mrs. Barry looked at Minnie May and then gave a small nod. Diana had been holding her breath. I didn't know what to do, but Anne did. Mrs. Barry rested a hand on Diana's shoulder. You stayed calm, she said. You listened and did what was needed. And then she looked at Anne. You found the right medicine, she said. Anne didn't answer. After a while, when it was clear Minnie May was out of danger, Anne stepped back. I should go, she said quietly. Mrs. Barry turned toward Anne. Thank you for staying. When she was outside, she walked slowly at first, thinking about the sound of Minnie May's breathing and how it had changed. She thought about what Diana had asked. How did you know what to do? Anne didn't know exactly what to do, but she knew she had to stay there and do what needed to be done. By the time she reached Green Gables, the sun was lower and the light had grown dimmer. Marilla was in the kitchen when she came in. You're later than I expected, she said. Anne took a breath. I got over to Diana's house and everything was dark and shut up, she said. And then I found out what was wrong. Minnie May was sick. She was having trouble breathing. Marilla went still. Oh, no. Is everything all right now? Anne nodded. She's much better, she said. Marilla let out a breath, but her eyes stayed on Anne. What did you do? Anne stepped a little closer. I knew what it was. I had seen it before with the babies I used to take care of, she said. I gave her some medicine, just a little. We kept her warm and watched her. Marilla listened closely. And that helped? Yes. And after a while, she felt better. She was able to rest. Marilla shook her head slightly, more to herself than anything else. That must have been frightening. It was, a little, Anne said. But once I knew what to do, it wasn't so bad. Marilla looked at Anne for a moment longer. You did exactly what was needed, she said. After that, the house grew quiet again. The evening settled in around them, steady and untroubled. Chapter 22. The Talent Show. For days before it was ever announced, there had already been talk. It started in small groups, then it spread, moving from one group to another until nearly everyone had something to say about it. The Talent Show. It was the one yearly event students looked forward to more than anything else. A night when the auditorium would be full, the lights would be bright, and everyone would have a chance to stand up and share something they loved. Some students were already making plans. A group of girls who took dance lessons together were going to perform one of their routines. A few older boys talked about forming a small band, tapping out quiet rhythms on their desk as they spoke. Others said they might sing. Some spoke quietly, not sure yet, and others with easy confidence that made it sound so simple. Later that afternoon, the teacher, Mrs. Stacy, stood at the front of the room. I know many of you have been waiting for this, she said. The sign-up sheet for the talent show is posted on the bulletin board. If you'd like to participate, be sure to add your name before the end of the day. At once, the room filled with excitement. A few stood up right away and wrote their names. Anne glanced toward the bulletin board, then back at her work. She didn't move. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. Still, she found herself thinking about it. What would she even do? She could feel it in her chest, part excitement, part nerves. She thought about reading out loud, but even that made her hesitate. As the day went on, she kept noticing the board. Each time someone added their name, that same feeling returned, pulling her forward, then holding her back again. At the end of the day, students gathered near the front. Anne stayed where she was, watching. Diana leaned toward her. You should do it, she said. Anne shook her head slightly. Standing up there in front of everyone? There's nowhere to hide. Diana smiled. You'll be fine. After the room had emptied, Anne walked slowly to the front. The paper was still there, filled with names. She picked up the pencil. For a moment, she didn't write. Then she thought about choosing something she already knew. She wrote her name carefully and didn't go back to change it. That evening, she sat with a book in her lap, turning the pages until she found the passage she wanted. When she read it out loud for the first time, the words came too quickly. She stopped, paused, and then began again, slower this time. She paid attention where to pause and where to breathe. Later, she practiced in the kitchen while Marilla worked nearby. Again, she began to rush. You're going too fast, Marilla said. If you hurry, people won't understand you. Anne practiced the next day and the day after that, and each day the words came a little easier, more steady. By the time the night of the talent show arrived, she knew the piece nearly by heart. The auditorium was full when they arrived. Rows of seats stretched across the space, filled with families, neighbors, and friends. Voices blended together excitedly. Behind the stage, the students gathered. Some whispered their lines, others stood still. Anne stood among them. Her heart beat faster than usual, and her hands didn't stay quite still. When her turn came, that nervous feeling rose all at once. She felt her stomach drop. She felt her heart beat in her chest. Everyone was waiting. For a moment, she thought about not going up at all. But then she did. The room felt larger than she had imagined. There were more people, and they were all watching. What if I forget? The thought came quickly. But she began. The first line came out a little unsteady, but she kept going. The second one came easier. By the third, she had found her rhythm. The nervous feeling didn't disappear, but Anne trusted herself and continued. When she reached the end, she finished the last line and paused. Then the room filled with applause and cheers and, "Good job, Anne!" Anne blinked once, surprised. Then she smiled, a real smile. She stepped off the stage. Diana came toward her at once. "Anne, you were wonderful," she said. Anne let out a small breath. "I thought I might forget the beginning." Diana leaned closer. "Oh, and I almost forgot. I have something to tell you," she said. "Mother says you may come with me next week to stay at my aunt's house." Anne looked at her. "Really?" she said. "I've never done that before." Diana smiled. "Then it will be something new." "Well," Marilla said, "you did very well tonight." "I was nervous at first," Anne said. "I could tell," Marilla replied, "but you didn't let it stop you." Matthew nodded. "You sounded real good," he replied in his quiet way. Later that night, Anne stood by her window. It was her favorite spot to think. Everything was quiet. She could still remember what it had felt like to stand there with everyone watching. There had been a moment when she didn't know if she could go on, but she had stepped forward, and she finished what she started. This is where we'll leave Anne today, brave hearts. What stood out to you? Let's talk about it. I want you to think about what's happening in the story and notice what moments made you feel something. I noticed a few things as I was reading. At the beginning, Anne wore her new dress to Sunday school. I really liked how confident Anne felt at Sunday school. I think her dress played a big part in that. It helped her feel more confident. And I was surprised at how quickly things changed at the picnic. The brooch went missing, and people were looking at her differently. Anne didn't even get a chance to explain before people started making up their minds. Even though she told the truth, she still had to apologize. Did you notice that too? Have you ever tried to defend yourself, but the other person had already made their mind up and just wasn't hearing you? Later, when Minnie May got sick, what do you think you would do if you were Anne? Anne had seen something like this before. She didn't panic. She knew just what to do. And then came the talent show. She wasn't sure she could do it. You could feel that moment where she almost didn't go up at all. The fear was there. But she didn't let it decide for her, and she chose to trust that she knew what to do. What feelings did you notice about those moments? Let's name those big feelings, because when feelings have names, they aren't quite so overwhelming. Blame. Being blamed is when something goes wrong and people think it was you, even when it wasn't. Anne felt this at the picnic when the brooch went missing. She knew she hadn't taken it, but she still had to say she was sorry. Have you ever been put in a moment like that when something wasn't your fault, but it still felt like it was put on you? Responsibility. Responsibility is when something needs to be done and you choose to step in. Sometimes it means helping, even when you feel unsure. Sometimes it means staying, even when things feel a little scary. And sometimes it means using what you already know instead of waiting for someone else to tell you what to do. Anne felt this when Minnie May was sick. She didn't step back. She stayed, and she helped until things got better. Can you think of a time when you had a moment where someone needed you and you showed up? Confidence. Confidence is when you trust yourself enough to take a step forward. It doesn't always show up at the beginning of something. Sometimes it shows up after you decide not to back away. It's that moment when you're standing there, not sure if you can do it, and then you do it anyway. We've all had moments where we feel unsure. Your mind might say, "I don't know if I can do this," and your body might feel a little nervous and shaky. Anne's sure did. But you do it anyway. You take the step, you begin, and you keep going, even if it doesn't feel perfect. When you look at all these feelings together, you can see that Anne is still learning. Things don't always go the way she expects. Sometimes they feel unfair. Sometimes she isn't sure what to do, but she keeps going. So, as we finish today, I want you to think about this. What do you do when something feels unfair or when you're not sure you can do something? I hope you choose kindness when things feel unfair. And when you're not sure you can do something, I hope you choose to try it anyway. I would like to ask you to try something with me. The next time you feel a big feeling, just notice what happens. Do you say something right away? Do you take your time? Or do you hold that feeling quietly? You can't feel something wrong. How you feel is how you feel. What matters is learning to understand what you're feeling, then choosing how to say it in a way that feels right and kind. And that's what Anne is learning. Sometimes when things feel big, like when you're nervous or unsure, your thoughts start to move really fast. The most important thing that you can do is slow down. Take a breath, not a quick one, a slow one, and then listen, not to the loud thoughts that rush in at first, but to the quieter voice underneath them. That steady voice inside you is always there, even if it's hard to hear at first. And sometimes talking to someone you trust can help too. Someone who listens and who can help you sort through what you're feeling. You are learning to trust yourself, and that takes patience, practice, and time. And as you begin to notice that quiet little voice a little more, and you will start to realize something important. You hold all the answers. I had such a good time reading with you today. As we wind down, let's take a slow breath in and a gentle breath out. Remember, you are not too much. You belong here. You are exactly who you are meant to be. Until next time, be gentle with your heart. Keep noticing your thoughts and feelings, and remember that being hopeful, curious, and a little unsure is a part of being brave. I can't wait to keep reading with you to see where Anne's journey takes us next. And don't forget, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Girls Who Rise so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, brave hearts, see you soon.